A Coke at Disney World costs around $6. You know that's expensive. Disney knows you know it's expensive. And yet, people keep buying it all day long. The usual explanation, the one that you are thinking right now, is that Disney has a captive audience. You're literally a hostage with a wallet. There's some truth in that, but it misses the more useful pricing lesson. First, suppose that a shop near your home charges $6 for a Coke. You probably don't buy it. There's another shop nearby, so saving $4 requires almost no effort. At Disney World, you can still refuse, but you're already inside the park. You've been walking for hours, it's hot, and perhaps, well, most probably, your children want a drink as well. You could spend time looking for a slightly cheaper option or just leave the park entirely. Most people won't. And this is where the price becomes interesting. The cheaper alternative hasn't disappeared, it's simply become very inconvenient. Inconvenient enough to lose much of its relevance. That's a form of pricing power. I made a full video about pricing power earlier, that's above, and one of the central ideas was that your ability to charge depends heavily on how easy you are to replace. So I often talk to businesses looking at a competitor charging 20% less and immediately concluding that their own price is too high. Before doing that, you would want to know what the customer actually has to go through to get that cheaper price. And sometimes it's enough to make that 20% irrelevant, which makes your higher price totally okay. There's another reason the Coke doesn't feel quite as outrageous as it should. By the time you see it, you've already agreed to spend a lot of money. A day at Disney can involve tickets, accommodation, food, transport, and whatever your kids manage to discover in the gift shop without ever looking at the price tag. The Coke arrives very late in that sequence. It's a very different situation from paying $6 for a drink instead of $2 at your usual coffee shop near your place. The difference is enormous. At Disneyland, you are adding $6 to a family day that may already be costing several hundreds. You're unlikely to convene a budget committee. Behavioral economists call part of this mental accounting. We don't treat every expense as if it came independently from one giant bank account. We create categories. Rent belongs somewhere. Groceries belong somewhere else. And holidays have their own category with remarkably flexible accounting standards. Once you're at Disney, another drink, snack, or souvenir can become part of the cost of the day rather than a completely different purchase decision. That's useful for pricing because people react strongly to the size of a purchase relative to the transaction they are already making. You see this outside Disney all the time. When you buy a $40,000 car, adding a $200 option during configuration suddenly looks like a relatively small purchase. Disney also understands something less glamorous about spending. Paying is annoying, not financially, psychologically. There is a small interruption every time you have to reach for your wallet, look at the amount, and actively approve another purchase. This is why I usually let my wife pay, although it's the same bank account. Researchers call this the pain of paying, and companies have spent decades making that moment shorter. Disney Resort guests can use a Disney band linked to their account for purchases in the park. You tap the wristband, enter a PIN, and just carry on. It's a very good customer experience. It also means that buying another drink doesn't require much of a break from the experience you're already having. The transaction almost disappears. Tapping a wristband does not feel like paying. I covered this mechanism before in the video with, a great psychological trick using high-end restaurants menu. That's above. So you'll find versions of this everywhere now. Hotel room charges, contactless payments, Uber, one-click checkout. That's a perfectly legitimate reason companies want payments to be effortless. Customers prefer it, and it happens to make them spend more. Now, if you're running a business, I wouldn't take the lesson from this video to be Disney charges ridiculous prices, therefore I can too. Your customers may have opinions about that. What Disney illustrates beautifully is that willingness to pay doesn't live inside the product. It depends partly on the circumstances in which the customer has to make the decision. Think about a company paying $500 a month for software. A competitor appears at, let's say, $350. If changing supplier takes only one afternoon, that $150 difference matters and you're likely to churn. But if it means migrating years of data, rebuilding integrations, and retraining 40 people, management may happily continue paying $500. The product hasn't suddenly become $150 better. The economics of leaving have changed the decision. Now take another example, the case of urgency. If you're looking for an accountant to do some routine work for next month, you'll go for the average market rate to pay him. But if you need that accountant to fix a problem for a filing deadline tomorrow morning, your willingness to pay may be considerably higher. This is why cost and competitor benchmarking can only take pricing so far. They tell you something about the seller and the market. They don't tell you enough about the customer at the moment the purchase happens. And that is often where the most useful pricing information is hiding. So yes, the Coke at Disney World is expensive. But if you've already spent hundreds on the day, you're thirsty, the alternatives are inconvenient, and paying takes a couple of seconds, $6 has quite a lot working in its favor. The context of the buyer is also what explains why Uber uses surge pricing. Sometimes up to $500 for a 20-minute ride. If you haven't seen the mechanics behind that, that's your next watch right here. If this was insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching. Take care.